Good. How's everybody's summer going?
I hate your stance about it. That's why. And that was my.
All right, well, have fun. Tell all the boys I say hi.
Yeah, well, they loved you. They had a good year.
love them.
Trying to go down to the end. Definitely a couple of recommendations on the budget. So I went on the website and it seemed like everything's one, 2 nights. That Friday night. Yeah, that would. 5 nights. Today's day. Good evening, everyone. May I please ask everybody to stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's nice to see that so many people turned out to listen to the auditor's report tonight. I want to thank you for coming and make sure that we're on the right track in terms of spending your money and doing it wisely and putting in safeguards to make sure that we don't have to do what Roslyn did about 15 years ago. But on a more serious note, I have a feeling we know why you're here, and we're grateful that you are here. Just a couple of organizational points. I see many new faces. That this number of people might come to a presentation on test scores and test reports would be my dream. But anyway, there is a restroom in the back for anybody who might need it. It's outside of this hall, just outside. You need a restroom, or water in terms of that. And just in terms of if in fact you're new, we hope you do return. Just a protocol for a school board meeting. That when it comes time to make a comment or to raise an issue, you will come down to the podium here and you will state your name and your address. And there is a 3-minute cap in terms of that to give everybody a chance to speak. We will more or less, as we do, we have a crowd, sort of take time and I'll sort of give you an indication that you're sort of running out of time. And since there's many here and many may want to make comment, I did want us to be respectful of that procedure. It's not just put in place here, it's been on the board for the 15 years that I've served, well before that. And then just a final point, this isn't a Broadway show and it's not a baseball game and not a lacrosse game. There'll be no cheering, there'll be no booing, there'll be no applause. Everybody has a right to speak and everybody has a right to express his or her opinion without any kind of feedback from anybody here. And if in fact you can't abide by those rules, then we'll have to possibly suspend the meeting or take some kind of action, which I hope we don't need to resort to. So once again, I welcome you, I thank you for coming out, and hopefully you can move on with the meeting. So at this time, I turn it over to the superintendent of schools.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. At this time, we'd like to start the meeting with the report of the internal auditor.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. I'd like to introduce Sherry Diamond from Serene Associates, who is our internal risk officer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. I'm Sherry Diamond, partner at Streaming Associates. We are your district's internal auditors. We function obviously on internal controls, risk reduction, as Michael mentioned, and also we look at your operating efficiencies and effectiveness as well as procedures, as well as your compliance with laws, rules, and regulations. These things I just want to go through really quickly, so I'm going to start the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Can you hear me better? Okay, so sorry. So 3 things to go over tonight: the risk assessment, focus area assessment of fiscal 2021, and the current year plan. Every year we do some level of a risk assessment as part of the internal controls that we have to perform in the district. In the fiscal school year 2019-2020, we performed a detailed risk assessment. We really met with everybody and the key officials of everybody in the district, and we did a big analysis of the risks in the district. And at that time, we issued a report in November 2019 of the top areas of risks that we thought. Well, who would have thought that, a few months later, those risks would dramatically change. So we put together what's called a 5-year proposed plan of our focus areas testing. And obviously, we're always looking at the focus of the district's overall operations and any changes that occurred, as well as assessing any external factors and emerging risks. COVID is one of those. So the internal audit function has to assess those risks and also be fluid and adaptive to those risks that are out there, so that we assist and provide the district with the best resources possible. This year, obviously, the pandemic was a concern for a lot of reasons. Inability of staff maybe to be able to perform their job function, especially those in the business office, tracking attendance of staff in a hybrid environment, increased demand on technology, and compliance with new and revised regulations that spawned from the pandemic, including reopening plans, remote work policies, and don't forget state aid. When we came into the fiscal year, we were thinking of a 20% cut in the state. Unfortunately, that changed. So the risk assessment report that was issued for the fiscal 21 school year, we did note a lot of changes in key staffing and the individuals that we look at every year. We look at any changes. We noted within the business office a lot of changes due to retirements. They affected accounting, purchasing, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and even payroll. So that's a lot of changes to take into consideration. We also noted changes in management of food services, as well as changes in the clerical position in the PPS department that impacted our risk assessment. The changes in the staffing did not impact or change the level of risks that we were understood from our big risk assessment that we did in the prior school year. We're doing that to make sure that everybody's job functions and responsibilities are sufficiently are in place. We also obviously assess what you'll hear from the after me, the management letter from the district's external auditor, and any prior year comments or recommendations we want to see about the status and if it's implemented. We look at the claims auditors reports on a regular basis, procedures, any instances that might affect our understanding of risk in the district. We look at board minutes, along with any new or revised policies throughout the year to see if any comments or the community might be available for us. We did note that the district did adopt policy 5676, privacy and security of the student, teacher, and the principal to include that law 2D, which is a requirement. We also never can look at changes in the IT environment because of the risks of cybersecurity. I think we all know what happy that it's been on the increase. So for the risk assessment that we issued for the fiscal 2021, were there any comments or questions that anybody had with that report that was there? It's kind of a benign, straightforward report.
I too go over the claims report every month. And it's sort of like watching paint dry, just looking at the numbers. But my question is, I'm sort of still concerned about purchase orders going out that have been authorized first and making payment. Now, I understand that there are emergencies in terms of the art teacher might need this, or the softball coach might need this, or the COVID, we might need this in terms of emergency. But when does it become a concern in terms of numbers or values of claim forms?
Right, that is a discussion that we've had. We actually did a review a couple of years ago because of that, and we are actually looking at that now, as so to speak. We're doing a bigger dive, which I was going to echo, but when it comes to the business office area, and a lot of the changes that have taken place, that's something that we're going to be doing a design review of, and we're looking at the functions and looking for efficiencies as well. So when does it become too much, or when does it become not appropriate? Then that goes back to us meeting with the claims where we're discussing with them, which we do every year, about the types of claims that are not being, following the correct purchase procedures, which is where somebody's circumventing and falling in contract with the vendor and not following the proper protocols of using a purchasing agent. Our understanding is that those purchases are all appropriate purchases, and when we do periodic testing, when we go through it, we're not seeing anything that's not appropriate. So
My second question is that they sort of alluded to the changes in the Mr. DeVito's in the business and operations office. So heretofore, you're pretty much content with the restructuring, for want of another word, in terms of positions, and that it hasn't compromised in terms of the integrity of the function.
right. Nothing has been compromised yet, and that's something that we're looking at now to see if we can further restructure the operations within the business office area to gain more efficiencies. And we're really, obviously, here with
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. I just want to talk quickly about the focus area test that we performed this year. It was a review of attendance that we did last year, 2 months ago. That was something we had a little brief upon, that was something to be looked at. It was interesting, we had it on our list to review that area when COVID came to town. So attendance is the largest test that you perform in any district, and there's a lot of moving parts. You have a lot of attendance codes, you have bargaining unit contracts or individual contracts, everything has to be blended together. And we're looking at the policies and procedures that are in place to track, monitor, and communicate staff attendance throughout the district. So I thought the timing was really good that we did it, even with COVID, because we looked at the 19-20 year, we had a full year data. And what happens, March of 2020, districts had to close, had another revised requirement. So it's interesting to see how the procedures were in place before COVID, while COVID is happening now, even still, and what we anticipate to go back to. So that report, we're almost done with that review. It's a very large review, we're wrapping it up right now. And hopefully we'll have a draft report to my about 2 weeks from that. Sure. So that's like I said, a pretty big review. I'm hoping to discuss that.
Excuse me, and then do you come back and talk to us about the agenda report
Yes.
this fall?
Yes, that's the intent.
All right, great.
Yes.
We can't guarantee the same number in terms of the crowd. But
I'm kind of like, wow, we never get this. People are driving from over. Sorry about that.
We'll have our next audit committee meeting probably in November.
That's fine.
Time, and we hope that you can come and share the specifics of the results of that testing area.
Yes, we definitely have some recommendations and to improve the control structure, improve efficiencies as well. I do want to thank, we've interviewed and talked to a lot of people throughout the district, and we received excellent work and a special shout out to Eileen Zep. I'm really happy and thank you for staying with us. Just real quickly to wrap it up, just the internal plan for the year that we're in right now, the 2021-2022 school year. Obviously, we're in the process of updating our risk assessment. I mentioned that we're going to be doing a deeper dive into the business office area. We're kind of seeing how that kind of is going to go play out as far as the recommendations that are going to come out of the restructuring. So the possible restructuring, looking at it, efficiencies and things like that. So we'll keep you posted, on how that's going. Obviously, you know, we get that some requirements, we want constantly review information. By the way, this is not just a Long Beach problem, this is happening in the same local people. Also, we're going to be monitoring all the recommendations. We have a few leftover from the special ed review of the revenues and expenditures, so we'll be looking at that. And a review of benefits, we're going to be following up on that. We're going to follow up on the review that was performed right at the end of the program, which is review of information technology. We had a couple of findings there, and I believe they were implemented already. And the focus test area, we originally had planned to do food service operations for COVID and cash in the hands of procedures. I don't think that that's the best use of what we're going to be doing. The following year, we did say that we would do a review of payroll, and I would recommend the board that that is an area that you would have us look at, you know, maybe in the spring timeframe.
So if it's okay with the board, we'd like you to consider that as a focus area for the spring that's consistent with their contract and their hours. And we'll revisit that in November.
Right.
And if the board would like you to move forward with that focus area.
Great, thank you. Sure.
Now we'd like to move forward with the planning meeting for the external audit. And the external auditor is Jill Sanders from Cullen and Danowski. She's going to be joining us virtually. So if you can just do that up. And now the difference, just for the public this year, the internal auditor who just spoke reviews our internal controls to make sure that the district is not at risk for any problems in the way that we operate. The external auditor really examines our financial statements. So the fiscal year for the school district ended June 30th. We're in the process right now of creating financial statements based on the transactions of the 2020-2021 school year. And so the purpose of this meeting for the external audit is just to discuss what their process is for auditing our financial statements. Ms. Sanders, can you hear us?
Good evening.
Good evening. I just introduced you, so feel free to begin the planning meeting for the audit of the recent school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to the meeting this evening, and I'm here to present the audit plan for the external audit for fiscal year 2021. And a document was prepared. I hope each of the board members had the opportunity to receive that document and look through it. I'm going to talk about the process, and I'm going to talk about some of the areas that we look at in particular. If there are any questions, by all means, at the conclusion of my presentation, please ask questions. So behind the table of contents, our purpose with respect to the audit is to audit the financial statements and render an opinion. And it's an opinion on whether or not the financial statements present fairly in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. As a reminder, in years past, the districts received the highest level of assurance in our auditor's opinion, and that it's an unmodified opinion, and we've been able to say that we believe the financial statements fairly present. Because the district expends federal funding, the district's also required to have what's known as a yellow book audit, in its accordance with U.S. Government Accountability Office auditing standards. And that report has to do with laws and compliance with regulations. And that report also had no findings during the previous year. The state also, even though the extra classroom activity funds are under the extra classroom activity central treasurer control, and the various faculty advisors in conjunction with the students with whom these activities are run, still wants the external auditor to present a report by club and activity as to, on a cash basis, monies that have been collected, monies that have been expended, and complete the year-end balance. And so that report is a cash basis report, and we will be providing that to the school district also. Then, because the school district is very aggressive in trying to secure as much federal funding as they can, they do meet the requirements of having to have a federal single audit. There's approximately $3.2 million during fiscal year ending 2020 in federal aid, whether or not it was FEMA or it was special education aid, or it had to do with aid for the food service program. That in the aggregate was what had been expended and received by the school district. And so because of that, we have to look at any major programs and make a determination as to whether or not the district is compliant with respect to the controls that they have in place in conjunction with spending and reporting the activity for those various major activities. So those are our primary objectives. And then there are a number of standards that we referenced on page 3 that we follow. You can probably read those yourself. Page 4, we go through the district's responsibilities. And so as a reminder, I, as the auditor, work for the Board of Education. My responsibility is to report to the Board of Education, and my responsibility is to audit the school district's records. And so the district's responsibility is to make those records available, to give us access to ask questions as the process is underway. Anytime we propose any adjusting journal entries, we suggest that the school district adjust the books and records, and these would not only be due to the timing of certain transactions after the completion of the audit. The district's been very good with doing that. So these are all the district's responsibilities, and I think the board and the community should take assurance in that there is a good set of controls in place, and we do get very good cooperation from the school district staff with respect to information we request and inquiries that we put forth. The methodology for the audit is described on page 5, and it starts with a risk assessment. And I know your internal auditor went through the overall risk assessment and looked at an area such as information technology, as is understanding the whole internal control structure as it relates to financial transactions, so that we can make a determination as to whether we can rely on those internal controls. And in prior years and in this year, in what we've looked at so far from an audit standpoint, that internal control structure is a good internal control structure, and we will be able to rely on it. And so that's how we start to assess risk. And so we understand it, we perform what's known as a walkthrough, we experience the transactions the way they're created by staff for the school district. And then we take a sample from the total population of the transactions that have taken place to see whether or not we can support the fact that the transaction was executed in a way which would give rise to an account balance in the financial books and records. And so we've performed all of that during this first phase of the audit. And as I mentioned before, the internal control structure is a good internal control structure. We go ahead and we review the internal audit report, as I mentioned before. We also look at the internal claims audit reports to see whether or not they have any bearing on the procedures that we might perform. We review the board minutes. Okay, we review, obviously, activity through the books and records that are posted through Envision, which is the accounting software used by the school district. And we do interview the personnel to understand what they do and to make sure, as they describe it to us, that we can map out the control structure and make sure that that segregation exists or mitigating control exists, so that there is a check and balance in place. The areas that you would expect us to audit are those that we do. I mean, obviously, payroll is the largest part of the school district's budget, payroll and benefits, as in all school districts. So that's a big part of what we do from an audit standpoint. So we will look at the controls over the processing of information with regard to salaries for employees, the rollover process of the salaries across the year. We'll take a sample of employees and we'll test their calculated payroll. If there's overtime, extra time, or certain additional things that have been paid to those employees, we will look at the support for those. We'll look at purchasing and cash disbursements. Same thing, we'll pull a sample of the cash disbursements from the total population and make sure that those disbursements are supported by the appropriate supporting documentation, that is compliant with bidding, if bidding applies, or compliance with the purchasing policy for the Board of Education. We'll look at receipts and collections to the extent that there are services provided for either people inside the school district with respect to use of property, or outside of the school district. And we'll look at the calculation on a sample basis for some of those billings and look at the cash receipts. The accounting information system, we already reached out to the information technology director. We gathered some information as to the support structure in place, and we've evaluated that with respect to the financial statement audit, and that all seems to be in place. We look at banking and bank reconciliations, and so we test a number of those bank reconciliations, all the way from what's provided by the treasurer through the books and records and up to the reports that are given to the Board of Education on a periodic basis. We'll look at journal entries and budget entries, and we'll also look at the extra classroom activity fund transactions, receipts, and disbursements. So that's all part of the risk assessment. And so that has been done. We actually were provided with information, I believe, of June 14th. And so we were able to complete that phase of the audit. So the substantive phase of the audit is where we actually can determine that the account balances are fairly stated and the transactions are fairly stated also. And so that will be done during the week of September 27th. And it's pretty much the same areas we're going to be looking at to make sure that, as I said before, that there is support and then that the balances do make sense to us with respect to these areas, payroll and related liabilities, revenues and receivables, reserve activity. We know that the Board of Education has a number of reserves in place, and these are authorized by general municipal law, education law, and there are controls over those reserves, so we look at those with respect to what the Board of Education might have provided for utilization and funding of those reserves. We'll look at capital project expenditures, and then there is third-party reporting of fixed assets, both those that were acquired and those that were disposed when we're deemed something to be obsolete. We'll tie that into the third-party inventory report provided by that particular company. There are some long-term liabilities for financial reporting purposes, and so you actually have an actuary who will calculate the GASB 75, which is the other post-employment benefit liability number. This is just for financial reporting. And you will be receiving information from both of the retirement systems with respect to whether or not there's an asset or liability of which your proportionate share needs to be reflected on the financial statements. And so those pieces will be looked at as well as any other long-term financing debt. And then at the conclusion, once we have all the numbers in place and all the support for those numbers, then we perform what's known as final analytical review. How do the numbers look compared to the previous year, to the extent that we see something that we can rely on from a pattern standpoint? And some of that's difficult because obviously, as we know with COVID, things have changed from a spending standpoint. So we'll do final analytical review. We'll review the numbers obviously against the budget, because you do remember that in the financial statements, I do provide supplementary information, which is a budget to actual analysis. And then we will start to draft the financial statements, and this is with the school district's assistance. And then with that, I will complete the balance of the reports, and I will come to the Board of Education with those reports in draft to discuss them. Subsequent to that time, the reports can get released to the Office of the State Controller and the State Education Department. And as in past years, because the deadline and the type of work in conjunction with the federal single audit is different, we will be completing that audit during the first quarter of 2022 and filing that report by the March 31st, 2022 due date. And so that's predominantly my report. I have changed the staffing this year. I do like to do that from time to time. I think it's good to have a fresh approach. My principal, who is acting as the audit manager, will remain the same, Michael Leone, but the senior staff accountant and the staff accountant will be different than the previous year. So I think, with that, these are two people who are seasoned. My senior staff accountant has been with me about 15 years. She's a CPA, and my staff accountant has about 6 or 7 years worth of experience. And so they come to the table with knowledge of other school district and other local government auditing and accounting. And then there are some recent developments, and I think the most important part of the recent developments is really structuring for financial reporting. Some of the extra classroom activity funds, some of the agency funds, of which it will probably be easier to explain once you see it incorporated in the financial statement. So if I could reserve a lot of that discussion until you have that document when I come with those documents in draft, I think it might be more helpful at that time to address that. Were there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. We appreciate the thoroughness of the planning meeting, and we look forward to the report when you return in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Board of Education, and I will see you in October.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye. Okay, do we have a report of the superintendent of schools?
Sure. I just first would like to ask Dr. Romanelli to just give us a brief update on the conclusion of the summer school program.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Good evening, everyone. Happy to report that we had all 59 out of 59 of our middle school students pass their summer school classes that they were repeating. We had about 97 students enrolled in our high school summer school, and took about 122 courses. So some students had multiple courses they needed to repeat, and 122 out of 122 did pass their courses. That was definitely thanks to the teachers and administrators working in the program this summer. I know many came in early and stayed late for students who needed to make up attendance. There were a lot of phone calls home visits, things like that. And the goal was to get everyone to pass this summer, and they did at both the middle school and the high school. We also had our first time running the Math Literacy E&L Institute this summer. That was federally funded. We were using our funding to host that institute this summer. We had 125 students in grades 2 through 8 participate in that. Our attendance was right around between 75 and 80%. It was pretty flexible, as it was really an optional program, and some families were on vacation certain weeks. We definitely kept some data on all the students that attended, ran their spring NWEA scores in reading and math, and we'll take a look in the fall and see the impact the program had in terms of data. But students and families did report they appreciated the program and even learned and had some fun in the process as well.
In the extended day program?
The extended school year program, Mr. Lopez has reported that it went really, really well. There was an additional focus this year on social skills. Many of our students interact in person that had been virtual previously. And he said that right around the same attendance, 75 to 80%, and it was a successful program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Romanelli. The second part of my report tonight is a discussion of the September reopening plans. As you know, there's been a lot in the news lately about guidance or lack thereof of the reopening plans for September. I'm assuming you came here. Sorry. So we will, over the next 2 weeks, be deciding as a district what our September reopening will look like. We'll present those plans at the August 24th board meeting. And over the last week, and continuing, we have been doing what we do. We have to make some decisions and make some recommendations regarding our students. One of those things is to get feedback from professionals, health professionals and legal professionals. Better now? Nice to give you the data that one. Right. And then the other major piece of this is to listen to our community. We sent out a reopening survey on mask preferences last week. I can tell you that we've got about 2,800 responses from parents, and the responses ran about 50-50, which is pretty much been reflected in the emails that we've been receiving as well. And there are strong opinions on both sides of this matter, and we're here tonight to really listen and to hear what you have to say, what you'd like to share on that matter. And I want you to know that we truly do listen and try to make decisions based on our responsibility as a board of education and the superintendent, and based on what our community would like us to do. Before we start tonight, one of the people I consulted with is the pediatrician to like half the dining room here, Dr. Matt Cohen. And Dr. Matt has been a very, great advocate for our district especially over the past few years, but for many years. And he, I find, always has a wise and logical opinion on things. I called him last week with a few other pediatricians and asked him what he thought. And I asked him if he'd be willing to share a little bit of that tonight. So before we get into public opinion and Board of Education comments, Dr. Matt, would you mind just giving us a little bit of a summary of where you think we are?
All right, so I just first want to kind of emphasize to everybody that it's an extremely fluid situation. So if I may also talk to you guys as well. So we tested people from May 1st to about, let's call it the second week of July. I tested about 100 people there, that's the parents that come. And literally, we had not one single positive COVID test from May, June, and the first week of July. If we were opening schools after that first week, and I literally had no positive tests, the New York State rate was, I think, somewhere maybe 0.8, somewhere 0.4%. Basically, the alpha variant that we were seeing had washed through, and COVID was not in our community. And if you would ask me my opinion at that moment, with the current rate there, I would have had a lot more openness to give you the opportunity to unmask, choose masking, and choose the truth thing. There wasn't COVID there. You can't catch COVID, there's no COVID. But the situation has changed dramatically. So I'm just going to tell you what I'm seeing so that I can reflect, so you know what's in your community. So we test, the last 2 months, I've been testing about 5, 6, 7, up to 10 people a day, family members, children, for COVID. And like I said, very low rates. And the last couple of weeks, maybe 1 out of 5, 6, 7 people we tested were positive. Yesterday, I tested over 25 people with direct exposure with several positive cases. That is a significant increase. So this is a different situation now than it was weeks ago. And you just have to realize that this thing, by the way, this thing can wash. And the numbers change, the rates go down. I want to talk to you about there and talk to you about some of the science. Then we should lead this. We should not be married to one decision, but we have to be married to what is in front of us right now. Because if we don't, I think we will make bad decisions. So with that said, I just want to talk a little bit about the current state. We are seeing increasing rate of infection. It is higher right now than 1 year prior, and it is higher than this past February when we had full mitigation strategies. Right now, we need to be treated somewhere between 75 to 93% of the Delta variant. Unfortunately, the vaccine is currently less effective against this. Previously, it was believed to be about 95% effective in preventing all cases, still 99+% plus in preventing death, hospitalization, and so forth. The vaccine effectiveness now is believed to be somewhere between 65 to 85%. Okay? Immunity is also starting to wane. In other words, you got vaccine back in January. 6 months later, you may have less antibodies than you did before. So obviously, I'm going to answer all questions. Yeah, you can ask me. Let me just finish and I'll answer any questions. So this is a natural process. Vaccines, naturally, whether you got it by unfortunately, it's going to wane. And so between this, convergent circumstances of new variant and vaccine waning, we're obviously seeing an increase in the rate of this Delta variant. Vaccines are available for 12 and up. I strongly advise everyone to please vaccinate as soon as possible. Anyone with 12 and up. We believe it's going to be available to 5 to 12 within sometime. This is reported through Northwell and the CDC to be somewhere around September, October. For what it's worth, I have a 4.5-year-old and I have a 6-year-old. The second this vaccine is available, I will vaccinate my daughter the very next moment. The second, my 4.5-year-old, happy birthday, turns 5 November 24th. Happy birthday. Coming to the office and I'm seeing you fast. And that's just the way I feel about it. Let's go through some of the side lines, though. We're seeing new variants, all right? This is an unfortunate thing. When vaccine circulates among the unvaccinated, or even now amongst some of the vaccinated, we are going to see variants emerge. We are obviously seeing the Delta variant, while only slightly more deadly and slightly more, leading to severe disease. It is 9 times more contagious. Some postulate that if you are unvaccinated, you will get the Delta variant without fault. This is the next several months. So unfortunately, that leaves our children who are unvaccinated to be a prime host for this if it's spread. And it's starting. I'm starting to see kids. Are kids sick? No. In a significant way? No. Are they getting regular virus stuff? No. But as the numbers of children exposed and positive grow, some outliers will emerge, and children will get sick. The hospitals do have children hospitalized with COVID right now. And in terms of people always talk about, it's like flu and stuff like that, in a very small sample size, there were 400 pediatric deaths attributed. This is the Alpha variant, not the Delta, which is more contagious and potentially more deadly. There were 400 pediatric deaths attributed last year, and on average, it's at 200 influenza.
They have comorbidities?
Well, if you're not going to entertain any questions, why don't you speak to the doctor
I'll get
after
to
the
that.
public meeting, please let him finish his.
I just want to, I'm not really here to challenge you guys, but I'm just going to state what the facts are, and you can draw your own opinions from it, okay? So let's go through some other stuff. There's a high viral load, and there is increased shedding. Here's another piece of bad news. So there is some data to suggest that the Delta variant can shed for up to 18 days. Here's the problem with that. That if this thing is true, and they come out and that data, the 10-day quarantine, which is already, I know, bothersome to so many people, could be longer. I see them going to 14 days. I don't see them going to 18 days without a bunch of question. I would not be surprised if soon we do hear about an extended quarantine beyond 10 days. And that's due to a prolonged shedding in this particular variant that we do not see in the Alpha variant. All right, let's just talk about some other things. Gamma, Lambda, Epsilon. These strains are around. There are strains in Peru. They are around. These things like waves. They wash onto the shore. And when we have an unvaccinated population, for numerous reasons, they have a host. And variants replicate in the unvaccinated. They cannot replicate the vaccine in any significant way. So even if someone says, well, I choose not to vaccinate, and that's your choice. I don't believe we should be coming to these houses and force vaccinate. But actions have consequences. As you have restaurants in New York City, or Broadway shows, or schools. Your child cannot come without medical exemption if they don't have measles, if they don't have varicella, if they don't have diphtheria. These things exist. There's nothing new about this. There's no paradigm shit. We have these rules for a long time, and ultimately, not get judicial, but the courts have had numerous cases from the early 20th century moving forward about the ability to limit access to people who are unvaccinated and disease. Let's go through some other stuff. Masking and vaccination will lead to significant increase in transmission of the Delta variant. If not masked, Delta variant and the other variants will spread through the unvaccinated, such as our children. So let's talk about people who want to unmask their children. If you want to unmask your children, and by the way, if the situation was that we could, I would say go for it. I'll mask my children, you unmask your children. Here's the problem. You unmask children in the school right now, you will have increased quarantines in those classrooms. Fail not. Unmask your child, send them in, and you will have more quarantines. Your kid will be in and out of school. I'll get that in more than you can imagine. Okay? They will be quarantined. They will also have more remote learning, and they'll be further spread through our community. Okay? Many children, and this the educators can speak to far greater than I can, need in-person learning. They have mental health services that they only receive through the school. They have developmentally delayed children that receive special education and other therapies solely by in-person learning. Meals. There are dependent children that receive their main source of their meals through in-person. We quarantine these kids, and they will not be able to have access to that, as well as physical activity. Mitigation. Mask wearing is paramount to keeping our children safe at this point. We know this can work, it has in the past. Student-to-student transmission in the mask is extremely low. You can combine physical distancing, 3 to 6 feet, 3 seems to be adequate. All right, so we don't have to spread them out too far, hopefully. Screening tests, health habits, respiratory etiquette, and ultimately masking will increase access for our children to stay in school.
Thank you, Doug.
Board of Education comments?
Anybody else? Somebody speaks up.
Well, I just wanted to. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for that factual presentation. It's wonderful. My comment though has something to do with something else. I think it was Sunday and it was a rainy day, and I went on the boardwalk with about 50 other former students and some students now, and we did the ride for Val. We rode our bikes from Neptune to Magnolia in honor of this young lady who played soccer for Long Beach High School and who unfortunately passed away at the age of 20 from cancer. I'm bringing this up because it was a wonderful show of how Long Beach, we all get together to help one another in any time. So I just thought it was lovely that the students took the time on their weekend and their summer vacation to come and do that. Thank you.
Any other comments? I just want to publicly thank Mrs. DeVito and the business office. I want to publicly thank Mr. DeVito and the business office for the reviews by the auditor's report. It's a very big business, as you can tell, with a lot of moving parts. I want to thank you so far in terms of the remarks that we've made for both the internal and external auditor. I want to thank Mrs. Ramirez. I see you back there. Thank you for your assistance. And anybody else in the business office who might be here. A big part of our role. Always good to get a positive feedback from the auditor. Mr. Vito, thank you. We hope we get a golden report in October. Anybody else? Student organization announcements, anybody? No. Questions and comments from the public of tonight's agenda only? Questions and comments from the public on tonight's agenda only?
Does the masks count for those, written?
It is, as part of the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yes, thank you.
My name is Heather Lucasio, and I live
It's not working.
Yes. Hi, for everybody, I think we need to talk directly into the mic so that everybody can hear you. Hi, my name is Heather Lucasio, and I live at 636 East Park Avenue. I have 2 issues today that I would like to be heard. I only get 3 minutes, so please allow me to finish, and if you have a response, please wait until the end. I know that the room is divided on the mask issue, and I am not here to debate it. This is my stance on the matter, and for those of you who know me or don't know me, whether you agree or disagree, let's try to keep this simple. I want my children's high school teachers to see their faces. I want my kids to go back to school without the stigma of COVID. I do not think it is fair that vaccinated students must be masked to attend school. However, if it means that all students can be safe, I understand it. I am on the side of compromise, compassion, and understanding. I do not take issue with requiring my children to wear a mask in the halls or other public areas of the school for safety. However, once my child is at their desk, their mask should be able to come off. If we keep the desks 3 feet apart and students apart during class time, I think it should be up to the individual student to decide if they want to continue to wear a mask at the desk or not. I also understand the rules may be different for the younger children who are not being vaccinated. My second point is the arts. This includes musicals, dramas, chorus, band, and orchestra. However, I want to specifically speak to the musical. This year is imperative that the equity to the musical is the same as in sports. Last year, And I mean no disrespect to wrestlers, because I think all children should have, okay. I think that all sports should be, so I'm not debating, I'm not. Perfect. Okay, so. That it's imperative that there is equity for the musical as same as in sports. Last year, wrestlers could be on a mat with no masks, breathing and sweating on each other, with parents on the mat and spectators in the stands, while our musical was unable to be seen in person. Cast members were forced to be 12 feet apart and masked on the stage that had no audience. If Broadway is back in September and they have figured out a way to be on stage and have an audience, I'm sure that this school board can figure out a way to do the same. I'm asking you to please make sure that this conversation is had well before it's too late. Watching the musical last year was bittersweet. I am overjoyed that we were able to have one, but it was a musical that would have thrived with audience participation, and it was heartbreaking to watch these children constantly fighting with their masks and seeing key moments fall flat. The fact that these kids performed under the craziest set of circumstances the way they did was amazing. I can only speak for myself, but I can tell you that I am not the only one that did not bear the thought of having to do this again in the same manner. There is no reason outside another lockdown that should warrant a repeat. And as for chorus, this year there should be a concert in an auditorium and not in the gym. While I appreciate being able to be there in person, it was almost impossible to hear the children singing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anybody?
No, we're going to take it, as I said, in response to your email. We're going to take it under advisement, and you'll be getting a response in 2 weeks. Name and address, please.
Johanna Stonefield, 535 Grand Boulevard, Long Beach, New York. Can everybody hear me? Because I was back there, it was very hard. Yes? So first, welcome, Dr. Matt. I actually hear a lot of great things about you. Thank you for your presentation. I do, and I'm sorry my back is to you, but I am concerned that this is the one-sided presentation. So the actual only big study done in the world with over 400,000 people, they were all young, it was specifically geared towards young people, reported in the Wall Street Journal this summer. This is the title. In children, risk of COVID-19 death or serious illness remains extremely low, new study finds. And it actually dives into the risks associated with the vaccine versus the risk of what happens when you get COVID related to young people. So if we're presenting, we have to understand that a doctor has a view. There's a doctor that has another presentation, who's an immunologist, it's all over the web, that actually has some very interesting information. So for example, we're going to chase our tails. I think that's a quote, because we didn't eradicate the flu and we're not going to eradicate COVID. It's an animal-borne virus, and when that's the case, it's not smallpox and you cannot eradicate it. I'm not an expert, but I do read a lot. So I just think that it's very important that we consider, as we know, we talked about special education kids and how difficult it is to them. We didn't talk about kids wearing glasses. We didn't talk about a child that was actually taken away in an ambulance in front of a lot of people because he had, I think, an asthma attack while he actually had his mask on. It was a little bit horrifying. I wrote to you guys about it. I think that at some point, someone has to acknowledge in the state, here in this auditorium, that at some point, I mean, what is the end game? Are we wearing masks for the rest of our lives? I mean, my son does not want to protect.
Once again, I made the point at the beginning, and I'm going to enforce it. This is not a lacrosse game, it's not a basketball game, it's not a contest. If you persist in applauding or booing, you'll be asked to leave, and security will escort you. And if that doesn't work, we'll have a policeman come in to take you out. It's a very simple directive. We ask you to please comply. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just to quickly finish up, and I'm saying this respectfully because people have different exposures, different philosophies, different things. And we're very good at talking about equity versus equality in this district and across the state, but it doesn't apply to masks. So if a kid has asthma and it's not good for them to sit in the classroom, it's It's equal for all. If someone does not have high-risk parents at home and is comfortable not wearing a mask when they sit, is it equity or is it equal? And I'm just asking you to just balance that out, read that Wall Street Journal article, and next time, please, respectfully to the community that you serve, invite people from both sides. Thank you.
Again,
Sorry to have done this before, but it's just 3 minutes.
yeah, your name and address.
My name is Brian DiNicola, 27 Maple Walk, Long Beach, New York. I appreciate this opportunity here, so I'll start with my 3 minutes here. I just wasn't aware of that. Can't hear me? I'll speak loud. Whether you believe in getting vaccinated or not, that's everyone's opinion. We all know COVID is real. But everyone above the age of 12 has had an opportunity to get vaccinated now. The fear and risk to our children is simply that, it's fear. But it's not based on facts like we've been hearing, or any science that I am aware of. I just went to the CDC website, this is not from anywhere else. Over the past 18 months, children between the ages of 0 and 17 accounted for 349 deaths in the United States. During that time period, 842 died of non-COVID related pneumonia and 108 died of non-COVID related influenza. While all deaths are tragic, they must put into context that the 349 COVID related deaths represent 0.00005% of our population's deaths. The children are not at any grave risk from COVID. We know that because the data is right there on the CDC website. I didn't make this up. Pneumonia is more than double likely to kill our children, yet we never mandated masks for the flu, pneumonia, any illnesses that are similar in manner. Why now? Now that we have the facts, this is not 2020, this is 2021. The science and the facts are in. The vast majority of the children have been playing indoors and outdoors for the entire time, at houses, at the parks, but not at school. They eat inside restaurants and they do this day in, day out, not at school. The reason is liability, and no one on this panel wants liability, I understand that. We need brave panel members to make fact-based decisions, and the facts I presented are on the CDC website. All you have to do is look it up. And if you don't already know, the facts are that unless you properly wear an N95 mask, none of the kids are safe. You're doing nothing. The masks do nothing. They wear cheesecloth masks to schools. Why are we doing that? It does nothing. It's proven. It's science. I'm not against science. This is science. I hear the arguments that, oh, well, kids can get sick from COVID. But maybe they don't get sick from a numerous amount of diseases. They get stomach bug, they get coxsackie, they get thrush, they get strep, they get meningitis. But you don't make them wear masks for any of these illnesses. We always hear this narrative that parents are always looking to protect their children. Childhood obesity is 20% of our children now. 266 of those deaths were caused by comorbidity of childhood obesity. That's 75% of the deaths that we could have prevented. But we do nothing about it. Nothing. We stop the kids from playing sports. We stop them from exercising. We stop them from hanging out with their kids. When they are fine. It's about us. Suicide and addiction rates are through the roof. Why? Because of us. We did this, not the kids. We're forcing them into these tunnels. Luckily, my kids, because I take them out and do stuff, they're going to be okay. But a lot of kids, they're not. Before I conclude, there was a notice sent out to all the parents. At this time, the CDC still requires students to wear masks indoors and outdoors on the bus. The CDC does not actually say that. That is false and misleading. Look it up. The CDC says recommendation. It's a recommendation. It is not a mandate. So why are we doing it? We're doing it in our own homes. It's up to you guys. It's not up to us. Sorry, thank you. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's a liability on the board. The board doesn't want to take the liability because they're afraid of the outcome. But due to what we see in the CDC, right? We're supposed to trust the CDC. They're going to be okay. Thank you.
Hi, I have a 6-year-old. My name is David Clammer, 31 Nebraska Street, Liz Clammer. Someone in Charles Darwin just once said, ignorance more frequently begets confidence than it does knowledge. In other words, ignorance is bliss, and trust me, I get it. It can get scary in the modern world. But if you're going to just bury your head in the sand like it's easy to run a painful thing and wish everything's fine. These people are citing data from the CDC from 2019. 2019, like you said, 2021 now. COVID is not going to go away anytime soon. And only time is going to tell whether it's harmless and innocuous or how lethal it is. Well, my child doesn't have the opportunity to get the vaccine that he's 6. Okay? Let's slow down. If time is a great healer, let's slow down. Why are we rushing to make sure masking is not universal? Why don't we look to the other states? States would turn back on their decisions because suddenly they have more cases of childhood COVID in the hospitals, kids on incubators, kids airlifted by a helicopter because they're dying from COVID last week. I have here citations and everything else for the ones I'm not going to go through them now. But what kind of privilege do you people who don't want masks think that you're entitled to decide for your child whether they're going to get masked, whether they're going to get vaccinated, whether they're going to stay alive? This is not fear tactics, okay? When seeking the right advice on staying healthy in a pandemic, scientists, doctors, not moms, unless you are a doctor mom or a scientist mom, that's just an opinion. Everyone has one, you know what else they have. People back up their opinions and they know what I'm talking about because some things you can prove anything you want. You can prove from a YouTube video that's going to get taken down. And then it'll get put back up again. I'm going to trust real science. I trust people like Justice Bowman. I trust people on the side of logic, knowledge. I trust the CDC who has recommended that everybody will get. And the American Academy of Pediatrics that has recommended everyone over the age of 2 should wear a mask regardless of vaccination status as the COVID Delta variant continues to surge. That's literally last week's news from August 3rd. Now we're to Lambda, Iota, Epsilon. Come on, it can be so freaking simple, people. It's so simple. Dad referred to in a hospital this week.
Could you please get your summary of time
Okay.
left?
Almost twice as many in the previous week of new pediatric COVID cases. Johns Hopkins, all children's hospital, 181 children testing positive in July, up from 12 in June.
Okay, your summary, ma'am, please.
Okay, well, the societal impact is
Summary.
greater with max optional versus mandatory because it leads to more closure. So do you want to disrupt your children's routine and their learning and get everyone sicker? Closing the schools, that's why.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mrs. Stout. Very important that we stick to the 3-minute rule. You can see that. So please, ma'am, name and address,
Hi,
please.
can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Kristen Capizia, I live in 554 East Chester Street. It's quite depressing that we have to be in this situation at all. I think we all realize that, but I think it's really disgusting that we have to fight so hard to keep our kids safe. Both the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend masks in schools. Neighboring states such as New Jersey have already made this a statewide mandate, and I believe that we should be following suit. States that made it illegal, such as Arkansas, are now backtracking and trying to find ways to allow their districts to mandate masks. So out of control there. The Delta variant is looking to not only be more contagious, but probably cause more serious illness in children. According to the New York Times, over the last week, 216 children per day are being hospitalized. Some are going to intensive care. As we don't yet know for certain how much more destructive this is to our kids, shouldn't we be cautious and careful? Certainly no. Are you willing to risk an outbreak in schools that will overwhelm our healthcare system? Are you willing to be responsible for kids being sick because masks were made optional? Without masks, how many times will the schools close? For a 1-week period in July, there were nearly 72,000 pediatric cases across the country. Once schools are open, if there are no masks, how many kids in classrooms will need to quarantine? And with these kinds of numbers, how will this disrupt everyone's lives? How will this negatively affect the children? Can this be mostly avoided with the mask mandate? Yes. My son was sitting next to someone who had COVID last school year, and thankfully he tested negative, as well as his little brother at home. The masks work from spreading it. The Long Beach vaccination rates are under 60% last I checked. That is not enough for herd immunity to offer protection to our kids. Perhaps if more adults were vaccinated, it would be safer for the kids, and the masks wouldn't be needed. It's your body, it's your choice is a bonus argument in this circumstance. Because what everyone does affects everyone around us. If I smoke a cigarette, it's my body, my choice. I don't smoke, but if I didn't, my body, my choice. If I blow that smoke onto you, suddenly my choice is affecting the people around me. And COVID works the same way. It affects everyone around you. The kids are okay. I've had the privilege of working in the schools. I had the privilege of working with kids outside of the schools. I see my son out of school with his mask on, not complaining, playing with his friends on the playground. None of them are complaining. The kids are okay. it's being projected onto them by the parents, because this whole situation has been made political rather than medical. These are medical things that we're talking about. What is not okay for the kids is seeing their friend get sick, seeing their relatives get sick. That is not okay. That worries them and stresses them out. Schools closing worries them and stresses them out. This is temporary. Nobody likes this, but this is the best shot we have of keeping our kids safe. Somebody asked, when does it end? Can you live like this forever? No, I don't think we can live in masks forever. But I think that until the younger age group are eligible for the vaccines, this is the best chance we have of keeping them safe. If I choose to vaccinate my kids, I choose to give them that level of protection. You can choose that or not, but at least until we have that choice, I believe that masks should be made mandatory, not optional.
Could you wrap it up now, please?
Sure, this is a public school, and the school should reflect what is best for the public as a whole. This is not a private school. If you don't like wearing masks, you go to private school. But public health should be taken into consideration in a public school system. I think we need to err on the side of caution. It's a minor inconvenience for possibly a short period of time until these vaccines are available that helps the health of our children. It shouldn't even be a debate.
Thank you,
fights
ma'am.
over car seats
Your time is
or
elapsed.
bike helmets. This is the best way to protect our kids.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Tim Kramer, 361 East Broadway. Thank you for letting me speak tonight, and I want to thank all of you for your service. Unfortunately, you guys are in a no-win situation. I think you know that. So I would like to speak tonight on the skyrocketing mental health issues due to our reaction to COVID. Not because of COVID, but our reaction to COVID. The fear of the mask, the plastic barriers, the social distancing, all of these issues have increased suicide rates, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, truancy, depression, anxiety, acne, declining dental health, declining grades, and reduced social skills. Our reaction to COVID is the real pandemic, and I feel we are ruining a generation. I didn't want to bore you with all kinds of stats because they are arbitrary, but I believe we can all agree the effects of our reaction to the pandemic has had devastating effects on our children. However, I want to quote from one text, the text of common sense. The book of common sense tells us wearing a mask in school is theatrical and baseless. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer.
Andrew Wolf, 241 East Broadway. I'm here to voice my disapproval of children wearing masks in school. I think that masking is inhuman, and masking children is wrong. And even if masking does help slightly, I do not believe that the benefits of masking outweigh the negative consequences. For the past year, my older child has been in preschool and now in summer camp. Masks are not required. We all know that little kids touch everything. We don't have the best hand washing habits. But isn't it fun? I've been fun. We haven't. Those are done. Fine. No masks. You might have a CDC directive for children to wear masks. But instead of just throwing up your hands and saying, oh, we have to do it because the CDC says so, I ask you to not comply. A requirement for children to wear masks is just not reasonable. And at some point, you have to stand up and say so. So just as I am standing up here against masking our children, I ask that you stand up against it too. And from what I've heard from a number of people here, I feel that we should be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Sir? All right. Stephen, yes.
My name is Sean Healy, 301 West Hudson Street. Hearing a lot about numbers tonight, no one's, except for the one guy came up here and said from the CDC. The lady before me, two people saying all these children are being hospitalized, whatnot. Here's the numbers from yesterday, the Nassau County website. In Nassau County, 190,036 total positive cases of COVID. At this time, 148 is of related hospitals. Of those, 31 COVID ICUs. When you do the math, it comes out to 0.77%. We're going to mask our kids up over this. Another lady who's for masks also said it's not up to the parents about masks and vaccines, that we should listen to the doctors. Listen, I love Dr. Matt. I use him. I don't agree with a lot of what he said. I don't agree with a lot of what he said. That's okay. I still go along. What was I saying? But I can go find a doctor that just says everything the opposite. You came here, you brought your doctor up here, you pretty much fear mongering. In my mind, it was a fear tactic to get masks on. Our kids, like the gentleman just said before, their mental health is not right? Talking to my daughter, going back to school in a couple of weeks, is already crying about having to wear masks. They just spent the whole summer with their friends, in and out of restaurants, not once were they wearing masks. Not once. You go around this neighborhood, you don't see anybody with masks on. Nobody. Go to the grocery store, yes, you see a few people. Majority of people got rid of them. Why are we going to take our kids who aren't getting sick? And Dr. Matt, he used the word potential. There's always potential. It's never going to go away. You're always going to get a word. The potential for this, the potential for that. When's it going to end? Don't do this to our kids, please.
Thank you. I just get a show of hands of people that intend to speak before the evening's over. Okay, we don't want to be here all evening. We don't want to infringe your right to speak. But I'd ask you, if somebody else has already made your point, you might be mindful of that, not repeated. I'm not telling you not to come up and make a point, but if somebody's already made your point more than once, either side, please think about it. Please, sir, name and address.
James Mangle, 517 West Beach Street. And I think time is not really the issue yet. The issue is what's important. I got a quick question for Dr. Matt.
Ask your questions to the board. You can speak to Dr. Matt after the meeting.
This is pretty significant.
I'm sorry, procedure is you direct your questions to the Board of Education.
Okay. I don't think any group of people or individuals should be bullied or forced into submission on any number of issues, but especially when it comes to one's sovereignty over one's body. For parents to choose health decisions for their children that they bore, raised, laughed, and cried with is sacred. To have the audacity to demand and threaten these families and their free thinking and questioning goes against what this country stands for. Free thinking and questioning cannot be met with ultimatums if we truly believe in democracy. Maybe opposing opinions will help shed some much needed light on what may not be as clear to those doing the demanding. Maybe the subversive narrative of the media should be scrutinized more intently. Maybe too many pieces over too many years, months, don't conveniently fit anymore. Somebody at some point, if they want to leave this earth with their soul intact, must push back against the tides that look to smother and drown opposing conclusions. You cannot allow friends, neighbors, and families to have rifts and wedges forced between each other over this debate. Parents and parents alone have to be free to choose what is right for their children. Don't force parents into corners. Just like a wolf cornered, he or she will fight like hell when pressed to defend their pup. Do not be fooled that we are not powerless to comply with this popular opinion at the moment. Just what if we wind up being proved correct? What if we wind up being justified in our concerns sometime in the near future? Who then is going to come help us? All we'll get, as in the past, is sorry, this is not a problem caused by the vaccine. Sorry, there's no compensation for your loss and suffering. What if you are wrong? I will fight to my last breath before I allow something potentially harmful to be forcibly imposed on my children. We can debate the efficacy and safety till we are all blue in the face. Every answer can be met with the flip side of opposite. Where has that gotten us? Nowhere. Adults willingly wear a mask, find it difficult to even use it for an hour. You're gonna ask our kids to go 5 days a week, 8 hours a day? That's an impossibility. Not to mention that they are only intended for short durations. They're not designed for long-term treatments. We did that with the question from Dr. Mack. I'm a first responder. Those masks are good for 30 minutes or one procedure. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Are they changing them every hour? Are they changing them every day? No, they're stuck around your neck, around your foot, around your chin. Again, let's be realistic and honest. Question what is most likely the first thing someone's going to do after they take off a wet mask after wearing it for 30 minutes trying to breathe. They're going to touch it. All right. All right, so after hearing all this testimony, I ask you to debate, not just listen and only dismiss us later with these concerns after reviewing the information. I've been here numerous times, not this particular, but in this situation, numerous times over the last 7 years trying to get medical exemptions for my son. I've been in the vaccine scene for a little while, so I know the way that boards go and politicians and everybody operates for the most part. We are your peers.
Just conclude, sir, please.
All right, okay.
Hopefully.
We are all intelligent and thinking people with the ability to decide for ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Leon. Thank you for your comments.
My name is Rebecca Utrecht, and I live at 542 East Harrison Street. I just want to say, I think that it should be up to each parent. So we should have the freedom to decide whether or not we want our children to wear masks or whether we don't. And the other thing is, I don't hear much at all from anyone, medical community, the school community, talking about what we can do to boost our children's immune system. What can we be feeding our kids, supplementing our kids with, so that we can have healthy kids who can fight off these diseases that are going to come their way? I have not heard any of that. Thankfully, I have a great support system of people around me who speak that, and I can go to them and talk to them and find out what should I be doing. And I will say that less than a week ago, I went to Dr. Mack's office, and Dr. Hutchinova was there. Both of my kids' sleep pillows were a little inflamed, and she was like, "These are healthy kids with their bodies fighting off whatever it is that's going on inside them." And I was just happy to know that what I'm doing is making an impact. And whether or not our kids go back in masks or not, I think there should be much more of an emphasis on what can we do to be a healthier community, a healthier country, instead of encouraging people for free fries to get vaccinated. That's not enough. It's not okay. And it's just a way to control people, I think. And she like me, because I don't public speak, but I just felt like nobody said anything about health. And it's so vital and important if we want the next generation to be well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Danielle Luxembourg, and report. Mother of two kids, my eldest is in elementary
Speak
school.
right into the mic there. Thank you.
And my eldest is in elementary school here in Long Beach, my mother is. So I'm a little bit more concerned with what's happening with COVID. Obviously, I'm susceptible my own home, as well as the person I'm also a leader of working groups, so I've been around a lot of these kids the past year with masks on outside and having experience. I'm here obviously asking, like I said, to you guys, to get masks as mandate. I know there's been a lot of conversations on both sides tonight. There is actually 2 university study that came out today, which I shared with the board, that followed around 1 million kids down in North Carolina. And it shows that when masks are optional, there actually leads to more closures in schools, more quarantine, and more issues. And I think what we had last year, where kids were in and out of school, was actually probably more problematic for health and mental health than actually having the ability to play with their friends and hang out with their friends with a mask. My daughter last year attended the middle school. Dr. Melly did a great job. It was an amazing experience. We were being protective, given I was pregnant. But if there was this option again this year, I don't think I would say yes, because I do want my daughter in the classroom. I want her with her friends. I want her on, but I want her to do this safely. And I think that there's a way that we can keep masks. And sadly, our governor did nothing. Mass County executives kick the can to you guys. You're in a very difficult position. You have to make these kind of decisions in a way that could be beneficial, because we can have the mask mandate as we return, as Dr. Matt said. The numbers, your kids aren't getting sick in camp now because the numbers aren't high just yet. But as we see in the South, the numbers are growing and crazy numbers. Last, just talking about 300 kids deaths. I don't know that any kid's death is worth the conversation. We're talking about these kittens of like, oh, it's only 300 kids who have died from COVID. It just feels like a very bizarre conversation here with sharing. And I think if we can think about this mask mandate for a temporary basis, I think that's exactly what Dr. Matt was saying. He's not the lead pediatrician locally. AAP has put out the same guidelines that the CDC does. They all recommend masks and mandatory, because masks optional, and parents' choice around masks simply don't protect everyone. It opens up to whatever happening in your kid is what happens. It opens up to more susceptible people. And unfortunately, there are going to be medical exceptions, but ironically, we were talking about my daughter went to a middle school last year. I still had to get her fully vaccinated before she started. I got a threatening letter that I had to get certain vaccinations or we're going to turn off her period. So we have certain choices when we're parents, but there are realities in what we have to do as parents and part of the community, especially when we're working. So I'm asking that the board consider what the CDC has put out as guidelines, because no one else will make a mandate. And I'm hoping that you're thinking about what senior citizens would like to say. I know there's a lot of noise, I know there's a lot of passion on both sides. I'm really sad to see that
Your time is up.
public health
Thank
crisis
you.
has become political.
Right.
We're all in the same community, and we should not protect.
Thank you for coming out, thank you for your comments. Okay, for those that wish to speak, if you could somehow go over across the socially distanced or whatever, so we get a sense of just how many more. Because we have a public meeting also in terms of this. I'm sorry. Your name and address. No.
My name is Jackie Fitzpatrick. I live at 503 Laurel Boulevard. I know everyone has different opinions on masks, so I did research studies that were done on masks and their efficacy of masks, and I came up with 3 of them. 2 of them from last year, and 1 of them from May. The first one was done by Stanford University, and the data there suggests that both medical and non-medical face masks are ineffective to block human-to-human transmission of viral and infectious disease, such as SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. The second study was done by researchers at the University of Copenhagen. And those researchers reported that surgical masks did not protect the wearers against infection with the coronavirus in a large randomized clinical trial. They studied, they used 6,000 people. They broke it into 2 groups of 3,000. The first half wore masks outside of their home, and the second half did not wear masks outside of their home. Researchers hoped masks would cut infection rate by half among wearers. Instead, 42 people in the mask group got infected, compared with 53 in the unmasked group that got infected. And for them, the difference was not significantly significant. The latest study, you can look it up, was on May 26th in 2021, and it was done by the University of Louisville. The study was conducted using data from the CDC, covering multiple seasons, reported that mask mandates and use are not associated with lower SARS-CoV-19 spread among U.S. states. And I quote, "Our findings do not support the hypothesis that SARS-CoV-19 transmission rates decrease with greater public mask use." Dr. Fauci himself has been quoted as saying in March 2020, when he was on 60 Minutes, he said, when you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet. But it does not provide the perfect protection that people think it is. And often unintended consequences, like people fiddling with their masks and touching their faces occur. He also stated at another time in an email with a former Health and Human Service Secretary, he had said that masks are not effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through material. Finally, I just would like to note that on the labels on all the boxes of cloth and paper masks, it says, antimicrobial face masks do not protect users against bacteria, viruses, germs, or other disease organisms.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Thank you for your time. Comment.
Hi, my name is Jane Kersey, and I live at 212 Franklin Boulevard.
Just speak into the mic then, please. Thank you. The green light is
My
on.
name is Jane Kersey, and I live at 212 Franklin Boulevard. I have 2 boys in the district under the age of 12. I am here to voice my strong support for a mask mandate for all students and staff, at least until children under the age of 12 are eligible for vaccination. I am truly saddened that I have the right to keep my children safe from a potentially deadly virus due to the politicization of this global pandemic. When the mask mandate for schools was lifted at the end of June for summer programs, the positivity rate for Nassau County was at around 23%. It is now at 3.5%. The Delta variant comprises over 90% of all cases in the U.S., and we are seeing an unprecedented number of children hospitalized. Children are being airlifted hundreds of miles, some out of state, for treatment because PICUs all over the South are at capacity. Children are also being intubated in multiple states. If masks are optional, I fear we will see the same fate in our community. The only defense for children under the age of 12 is masks. Masks work. At every level of research, it has been demonstrated that masks work. Multi-level, tightly moving cotton masks block droplets and aerosols that leave your mouth and nose. People argue that virions are smaller than that, but virions cannot fly. They have to be carried by droplets or aerosols. These masks are structurally able to block those droplets. Time and time again, when we see community compliance with mask wearing, we see a sharp decline in cases. In studies, we also see that mask wearing has zero impact on oxygen levels. The emotional and psychological well-being of our children is being impacted by school closures and quarantines, which will happen with a mask optional policy, not by universal mask compliance. We have seen the consequences of the absence of a mask mandate in Arkansas and Tennessee, where in one district, 900 staff and students have been quarantined the first week of school. This is not about government control. This is about protecting our children. The perceived violation of parental rights does not supersede our children's right to a safe environment in the classroom, or the right to not be infected with a potentially deadly virus, or the threat of long COVID with the possibility of permanent physical and intellectual disability. Please adhere to the recommendations of the CDC, AAP, and the countless pediatricians and physicians that strongly support mask mandates. Thank you.
Executive Committees.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Actually, the others, there's a lot of passion on the parents' end, on both sides of the man.
Just give your name and address, ma'am. Name and
I'm sorry,
address.
Christina Kramer, East Broadway.
Thank
All of which are well-intentioned. That is what both sides have in common. I'm sure the board is glad to see the parents involved regardless. Both sides want their kids to be safe. Now, what these two sides don't have in common is the ones that want mask mandates are not basing it on science or peer-reviewed evidence and research. They will have none to present because frankly it doesn't exist. There is no peer-reviewed published data supporting that masks are effective or safe for children. The CDC is now recommending masks again, and they are basing that on a study that failed peer review. It is unpublished, based on a vaccine in India that is not approved here in the United States. It is important to look at unbiased scientific evidence, and that's what I have. A new peer-reviewed study on masks in children published by the Journal of American Medical Association confirms that not only does masking children not prevent the spread of COVID, it likely increases the spread and is legitimately dangerous for kids. The study found that kids were inhaling carbon dioxide up to more than 6 times the acceptable limit for adults. A different peer-reviewed published study showed that the overwhelming majority of kids they tested with masks experienced effects like hypercapnia. That's excessive carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. The study found that kids also suffered from profound cognitive impairment, confusion, loss of consciousness, and asphyxiation. Another study done in Vietnam in 2020 showed that 2-layered cotton cloth masks in fact increased chances of viral infections, which would include COVID-19 by up to 13 times. The entire time that COVID-19 has been here, there have been a total of 335 kids who have died in this country. To put that in perspective, less kids have died from COVID-19 than from the flu. We don't mask kids for the flu. A professor at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Matt Gray, examined the records of all the kids I just mentioned who have died in the U.S. from COVID-19. What he found was that every single one had a pre-existing condition, which means in the United States, the amount of healthy kids who have died from COVID-19 is 0. This was published in the Wall Street Journal. Many states implemented mask mandates since COVID-19, and what we've seen is that when masks are used in cases of COVID, that cases of COVID-19 go up. Even in California, when they implemented mask ordinances over the first 9 months, cases increased. There was a small 6-week drop, and then it quickly increased again. Mask mandates do not limit the spread of COVID-19. If anything, all the data shows that they increase the spread. The only right answer is choice. I understand that the parents have fears of COVID and variants. Our family has fears of the vaccine. Other families have a choice to wear a mask or vaccine or both. Our family does not co-parent with the Board of Ed, and we want the choice to let our children breathe freely and not be inoculated with experimental shots. And finally, nobody's talking about natural immunity. Our entire family had COVID. We got through it. Children get sick, people get sick, and we get through it. This virus isn't going anywhere, and we need to learn to live with it, unmasked. Thank you for your time.
Hello. My name is Monique McLeod. I live at 148
Is the green light on, ma'am?
It is.
Okay, then just speak to the mic.
Can you hear me?
A little bit louder, I think the
Let
mic.
it get right up on it. My name is Monique McLeod. I live at 148 West Walnut Street. I didn't write anything. I actually wasn't going to talk at all. But I feel like I have to. So I just want to say I have 4 kids in the district, 2 in high school, 1 going into the middle school, and 1 going into 2nd grade at the elementary. My kids, all 4 of them, I know this is for everybody, really, I'm sure. This year, what it did to them is horrible. My family has been through a lot. This is something that we really just almost didn't get through. My daughter, who's a straight A student, was handling classes. My son is going to 2nd grade. He wears glasses. He has a learning disability. He had nosebleeds almost every single day. We can't breathe. I mean, it's really actually scary that we are having this conversation. It's proven that masks don't work. These kids are touching their masks all day long. They're in 2nd grade. They're touching their face. They're touching their doorknob. They're going to the bathroom. Wiping, touching their mask again. It's actually pretty disgusting. Obviously very against the mask mandate. I know you have Dr. Matt here, and I know his intentions are good. There's a lot of doctors that disagree with him strongly, and I think that there should be 2 sides, not 1. I also heard a parent say that she knows masks work because her son was sitting next to somebody who was COVID positive, and her son didn't get COVID because he had a mask on. Literally proved nothing. I've been around many people. My 4 children have been around many people without masks on, exposed in cars, in my house for dinner, not knowing that they were COVID positive, and we did not get COVID. It wasn't because of the mask.
Also, to everyone else's point, kids really do not get that sick from COVID. They just don't. They get a cold. I mean, I'm sure there's a very small percentage of children that do get very sick, and that's sad. But more children die from the flu every single year. Nobody puts them in masks. We're really doing this to protect the vulnerable. We're masking our children all day long. It's our job as adults to protect the children. It is not their job to protect us. So that's it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Gates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jen Slavely, 1 East Broadway. The whole debate regarding masks ultimately comes down to one thing: parental choice. There's no right or wrong side, since all parents are trying to make the best decisions for their kids. But that's just it. Parents need to make decisions for their children, whether that's masks or no masks, vaccine or no vaccine. Figuring out what is best for my daughter emotionally and physically, while also securing her financially, consumes me all day and wakes me up at night. No one should get to jump in and make a huge decision regarding her well-being. As well-intentioned as you are, you don't personally know all of these kids. You didn't personally speak to their doctors. Isolating kids, so social distancing them, and masking them has led to a decrease in their natural immunity, along with a slew of mental health, social, and learning issues. In your letter to Governor Cuomo last month, you stated masks should be optional in September. Stand by your words. The facts in your letter still remain: a high vaccination rate and young children mostly not being seriously affected. Dr. Gallagher mentioned via email that Long Island is an area of high transmission, although that does not correlate to increasing deaths. I'm happy that part. There's over 1.3 million residents in Nassau. Currently, 148 of them are hospitalized due to COVID or with COVID. There's been one death in the past 7 days. Think about that. 148 out of 1.357 million. One death. The New York state of emergency was lifted for a reason. The data is clear. There is no reason to mandate masks for our children, as the data doesn't support it. Also, there's zero need to test or quarantine healthy kids. We don't test or quarantine asymptomatic kids for the flu, pneumonia, RSV, strep, or any of the other countless illnesses kids come down with. The most telling data comes directly from the CDC. In school-age children in the U.S., age 5 to 14, out of every 100,000 children, COVID-related deaths are 0.2, flu pneumonia 0.3, drowning 0.5, and vehicle accidents are 1.9. If you're making this decision based on the safety of our children, it's clear that masks should not be required. If you go against the CDC data, will you also fill the high school pool with cement and suspend bus service immediately? Those are both far greater threats to the safety of our children than COVID. It's much easier to be a follower than a leader, but our children deserve a board that stands up for them and does what's best for them, physically and emotionally. I sent an email to Dr. Gallagher today in regard to this meeting's original agenda that stated masks were required. She responded back with the current CDC guidelines and then wrote, and I quote, "That, of course, is a recommendation, not a requirement. If you don't want to wear a mask, that is your choice." End quote. Why would it be any different for our kids next month? Why do parents have the choice today, as we did all summer,
Could you
but
please
not?
summarize, ma'am? Your time is up.
Why do parents have the choice today, as we did all summer, but not have the choice next month? As Dr. Gallagher wrote just hours ago, it's our choice. It should continue to be our choice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lederer.
Hello.
Good evening.
I'm still going to speak on the reopening plan, but it's a little different for me. The mask, I know that's the biggest concern. My concern is for my 13-year-old grandson who's a chronic asthmatic. He was fully virtual since March. I fear for him going back to school, period, because this is still so high and present in our lives right now. I'm looking for a virtual option. And even if it's not going in September, it's having a fully virtual option. If a student or the students have to quarantine or become sick, I'm hoping that virtual option will still be there. They don't have in this school at all. Also, with my grandson being sick and having to take medication every day, 2 times a day, I would, if he gets sick, I'd like to see me have that option as a parent to have him virtual. Like, I don't want to send him back. He missed the entire month of February and a week, or maybe a week and a half of March. He came back to school for 3 days and we shut down. And he hasn't been back since, well, he's been back on a couple of trips. But I'm just looking at the virtual part. I need to see him virtual. If I hope masks are maybe, optional if it has to be, so that if he has to come back into school, we can make that decision ourselves and our family, if he should come to school and keep the mask on, or he's gonna stay home and be fully virtual. And that's it. That, for me, is virtual. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Pamela Banks. I'm on West Bay Drive. I'm a pediatrician for 30 years, and I just want to ask you to make a correction in the statement that's been said. The mental issues of COVID were from virtual learning and isolation, not from wearing masks. So just that you all know that, okay? Now, I'm going to be very brief and short. My recommendation, masks do work. However, I think we can compromise. I feel that children wear masks in the bus, in the private hallway, and during the evening school. Once they get into their classroom, you can keep the desks 5 to 6 feet apart. They should be able to take their masks off so that they're not wearing them all day long. Masks protect children from getting illness. I know it's very confusing. Even as physicians, it's very confusing. We do so many different controversial things. But my own study, what I recommend to my parents, my own children, is that you can compromise and you should be wearing masks when you're in a crowded area. However, when you're seated at your seat, I think the children should be able to have the option of taking their masks off. I think that's a fair compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Banks.
Excuse me though, we cannot have at our high school and at our middle school, we cannot bring back all of our children and keep them 6 feet apart in a classroom. That was our issue last year.
Dr. Banks said 3 feet's good though.
Okay.
I'm not.
Once again, there shouldn't be any discussion. We're listening to the people speak.
She started.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Please, sir, rules apply to everybody.
Right, she started the conversation.
Please. She didn't speak to you, and you have no right to
She spoke
speak.
up all
Please, if you can't abide by the
about
rules,
3 feet, said.
the rules are for everybody. Thank you. Now, please, sorry for the interruption.
Hi, green light, I'm speaking right into this very shared microphone. Hello, board members.
Name and address,
So I'm Marnella, and I live at 354 East 10th Street.
last name?
Scholar,
Thank you.
no relation to probably any knowledge that you know, so I'm always asked. But anyway, hi, board members. This is my first time attending one of these meetings, as my son is just entering the district, and it's unfortunate that it's under these circumstances. I genuinely hope that each of you has been able to do what you have felt was the best for you over these last 15 or however long months to keep yourself and your family safe. I say this because I want to make it very clear that as a parent and just generally a smart individual, I know that we are all living with a very real virus. One that, like many other viruses and pathogens, could have detrimental effects on our bodies and have much lower likelihoods rates our children's bodies. That means that we each have the responsibility to support our bodies and do what we feel is best for ourselves to stay healthy. And that is, and our families, obviously. And that is all that we are trying to do. Everyone who wants to wear a mask and get the vaccine is making that choice because it is what they feel is necessary for themselves and their families to stay safe and healthy. They are afraid of the impacts of the virus, and so are doing what they deem necessary. Those of us choosing not to mask our children or have our children get the COVID vaccine are also doing what we feel is necessary based on our own fears. We fear the negative effects, physical, mental, emotional, of masks on our children, as well as the possible effects of the vaccine, when that day comes. So instead of partaking in those approaches, we are choosing to take other approaches in staying healthy, like someone said. The conversation of health has rarely been brought up. How do we keep our children healthy? Well, there's ways to do it. Me, I think other people who have spoken, we don't want to take anyone's choice away from them because we should all be entitled to make the decisions that we feel are best for ourselves and our families. And that is all that we are asking for today, and that is the choice. Making masks optional in school will provide us with that choice. However, in the case that you decide to mandate masks for schools, I ask that you first present us, or simultaneously present us with the data backing up your decisions, since you now can't say, well, this is what the state mandated. Others have brought up factual data tonight, and so we need to hear and see your data for backing up your decision to mandatory mask wearing. Not just a letter that says this is what's happening, but actually why you made that decision. So in making the decision over the next few weeks, just here are some questions to keep in mind. Where is there a study to prove that masks are effective in preventing transmission, protecting individuals in a school setting? Is there a certain type of mask? What are the risks and benefits of wearing them? Where's the evidence that social distancing is effective at preventing transmission and protecting individuals? So that might help if you really I'm finishing. If your data come back with that decision to mask your children, that's one thing, but so far the data clearly shows that COVID is a little concern to majority of children that wear the mask. Now, I'm just going to skip to this. I'm going to skip to this part and just say that if the choice is that masks are mandated, I will be pulling my child from school, and I'm aware that other families who feel the same as me will do the same. So that is really it, because I don't have time.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you for your comments. Okay, anybody else? Anybody after this lady? Mr. Gilmore, you? That's it? Okay, thank you. Ma'am, name and address, please.
Good evening, my name is Kate Judge, I live at 233 West Fulton Street. And I want to thank the board for your time and effort. And I really am happy to be here tonight with so many parents participating in our community and in this democratic process. I was going to do statistics, but it's kind of late. I just want to tell everyone there's a piece in today's Wall Street Journal, the case against masks for children. So please read it. And as a parent and an educator and as a responsibility, I believe, of myself and the board and all of us here tonight, our job is to instill a love of learning and a love of school in our children. And by masking them again, I believe it is counterproductive to this objective. I think our children are going to hate school and hate learning. And I think we need to see them as the human beings they are. And I implore the board to just let them live.
Thank you, Mr. Judge. Thank you. Gilmore?
Hello, my name is John Gilmore. I live at 52 Chester Street. A little personal history. My parents were found impacted by COVID this year. My mother contracted COVID in her house care unit, and they died in the hospital. My mother contracted COVID in her hospital, in her nursing home. She later died in the hospital. She was one of the people that were not included in the counts of the deaths in New York, which you're all aware of. Also, my son, Luke, was supposed to complete his last year in the life skills program at the high school. And when the decision came down last September that they would have to wear masks and there would be no vocational program, we just decided that it was time to complete school, and we sort of proceeded with this adult program. So I take the whole issue very seriously. A lot of what I wanted to say has already been said. I guess my main point was down. I read the letter from July, and it was given to me a very irate parent, and I actually thought it was a rational, fair way to go. I would encourage you to just stick with what you've already done, because I think it's the right way to go. And for a living, I am basically a lobbyist for medical rights and disability issues. I go to Albany all the time, and I've been fighting with our governor for 10 years. And I want to reframe this issue a little bit, okay? It is not at all clear to me that the governor has the legal authority to pass on to you this decision. You should not be making medical decisions. It is not an educational decision. You're being asked to make one such fits-all medical decision for thousands of kids with all kinds of problems, and you can't possibly monitor And one way or the other is wrong. And I think that's probably what was part of your thinking with the original decision. Well, I make it possible. And the governor has a habit of doing this because of all the time. He has people do stuff that he has no legal authority to make him do. And I would encourage you to have your counsel look into that. Because I don't think you should be making a decision. And I don't think any right to have you do it. So take that into consideration. And just one thing I wanted to add is that my next door neighbor was here earlier this evening. Her voice is shaking with fear and passion. Okay? And I don't agree with her. Okay, I don't. I've taken a look at some of the studies. I've read a lot about the studies. It doesn't look like really there's any clear-cut evidence out there that the bans do a lot. But there's a lot of people who think they do. And I don't see any reason why she can't be accommodated that her children can wear masks in school. And on the other hand, parents have been very powerful to space arguments that they should not wear masks. There's no reason why they can't be accommodated. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Noble. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen.
You have to speak right into the mic to make sure the green light is on, please. Okay, thank you.
My name is Karen Shiva, I'm from Island Park.
Just speak right into the mic.
I'm one of the few different people I am from Suffolk who have a student in the district. I have to say, I have one child who's already been through high school, and he has a wonderful time. But I'm going to say my second child now, who will be a senior this year, he's not having the same good time as his older brother. Things were taking one. He joined something, it's like malpractice. That is normal malpractice. They're doing everything through Zoom. Yearbooks are pictures of kids wearing masks in their yearbook. What is that? I don't want to be, and I'm sure he was even going to look back in 20 and say, oh, wow, he was a year that had masks. I just want to be able to have my child go to school without a mask and go back to things that he'd be able to do. Play sports, play an instrument, go to concerts after school, and show pride for the school. And that's all I'm saying as a piece. That's what I want to say. That I am really for our option to say we have a choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I think we have two gentlemen. I think that, no, sir, please come in. The gentleman after you. You have to speak into the mic, sir. Sorry. Green light up. Right into the mic.
Hello?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm just curious, how this works. Each one of you will have a vote on what tonight.
What'll happen is the superintendent will submit a recommendation in 2 weeks. At that point, there'll be a public meeting. In terms of that, it'll be on the agenda. People have a chance to speak on the agenda. The board will vote on the superintendent's recommendation for the reopening plan for school.
Okay, because I saw some on the internet, and I'm just curious on your professions outside of this board. I'm just worried about the space being in the pharmaceutical industry and how that will sway her vote tonight. I'm sure you guys already made your decision, whether to say or not. So that's just disturbing to me.
Well, that's an assumption on your part. I can tell you quite frankly for myself, I haven't made up my mind. And I'm grateful that I sat here tonight and listened to the people speak. And I intend to engage people in the next 2 weeks, whether I'm in the Lindell Deli, or the Stop and Shop, or the boardwalk.
Right.
Listening to as many opinions as I can.
And
My opinion is not.
And the survey that you sent out was also a little disturbing because you put mask optional and then mask only. So the people that are voting for the mask only are telling me what I have to do. Okay, I don't have the option with mask only. You don't have one that says no mask only, no mask at all, and I can't tell them what to do. They're getting a choice. They're inflicting their fears on my child by saying mask only. I want mask optional because I'm losing train of thought, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Right.
Be patient.
So,
That's all.
Okay, thank you for your patience waiting.
No. Can I make a comment, please?
Sure.
I just wanted to address your comments about me working with uniforms in the sales industry. I just wanted to say to you that I was elected as a Board of Ed trustee. Okay. And I'm not asking for a response, I'm just going to speak.
I thought you were supposed to allow.
No,
it's supposed to be an email.
But I was
It's
saying-
supposed to be rebuttal and email. Right? You had said no rebuttals. Why did she get to rebuttal?
Sir, would you please be quiet? If you want to come up here and run the meeting,
They're your rules.
please, they're not my rules, they're the policies and procedures.
You said
of the
no
school
rebuttal.
district. He addressed the question to her, I think she had I made.
He didn't address it, he made a statement.
I'm not carrying on a conversation.
Made a statement.
Please.
I'll finish my comment is that as I sit up here as an elected Board of Ed trustee, and that is the oath that I took. And so what I do as a profession has absolutely no impact on the decisions that I make sitting up here on the board.
Okay, next, please, I think there's a gentleman, sir. Name and address. Please.
My name is Nicholas Yoli. I grew up in this district. I went to West School. I went to Lark kindergarten, middle school. I graduated Long Beach High School in 1999.
Your present address?
99 Wyoming Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
I'm eternally grateful to this community for the education I've received and the experiences I've had. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old in the district, and I fear their chance at having a similar experience is at risk. The fact remains we're talking about an airborne respiratory pathogen that is not going anywhere anytime soon. The fact remains the district, for the most part, has abysmal ventilation systems. The fact remains there's a significant negative impact on increased CO2 in the learning environment. The fact remains, we keep saying mask effectiveness as if we're talking about one mask. My son's Hulk mask is not an N95 mask. It doesn't do anything other than slightly help his dismay when you really put it on him. The state's decision to leave it in the hands of localities is interesting in that it's a prime example of limited government. As a community, we have the right, more so the responsibility, to determine our destiny and do what's right for our children. I respectfully request you make masks optional for this school year. COVID or no COVID, our kids get one chance at this. One kindergarten, one prom, one first day of middle school. They deserve better. Our children can't share a pencil, but we can share microphones. You can sit on masks in this room when all of you are at much greater risk than our kids. I ask that you decide quickly so that we can either prepare for another school year in Long Beach District, or we could pursue alternative options. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I just want to thank everybody. We're going to continue with the public meeting. If you choose to leave, I ask that you leave quietly because we have an extensive agenda. I invite you to stay so that you can get a sense of what goes on in the meeting beyond the public comments. So thank you very much. President's report for June 2021. Approval of minutes of executive session, reopening the meeting, and regular meeting of July 1st, 2021. May I have a motion?
Motion.
May I have a second? Any discussion? Ms. Page? Pinto? Yes. Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. To turn over the presentation to the superintendent and ask if she can find any items, I'd be grateful for that.
I'd like to ask the board to consider items 1 and 2, certificated and non-certificated personnel, but certificated personnel as amended.
Motion. Second.
Discussion.
Congratulate all our employees and wish well to all those who are moving on to other endeavors.
Ms. Case? Pinto?
Yes.
Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes, and I would also like to congratulate all of our new employees, and I would wish the best of luck to everyone who is leaving us.
I'd ask the board to consider items 3 and 4, the acceptance of the internal auditor's report for 2021 and
Motion made. Second. Any discussion? Ms. Page?
Yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
Verona?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Items 5 and 6 are the first reading of policies, no action is necessary. I'd ask the board to consider items 7 through 16 with 15 as amended for a minor clarification.
Motion.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Can we ask a question on one of those, or is that not our time?
Under the,
In a few minutes.
Okay, I just didn't want to miss my chance, sorry.
Thank you for asking.
No.
No, okay. No discussion? May I have a, second, vote then in terms of 7 through 16 of the as amended. Pace?
Yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
Rhoda?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Board of Education, additional new role business committee?
I have a couple of things. I'm wondering if we have, I know that the county kind of started the process for approval of the cameras on the school buses. And I'm wondering if that's going to be in place for September, or if we have any kind of timeline on when that will be put into place. Mrs. Clark, I can tell you that I emailed Legislative Board on that. Leslie Productive, I did not get her back from her, and she's usually very good at getting back, so I suspect she may be on vacation. Did you hear anything more about that? Could we follow up on that? Because I'm just wondering if it's possible to get it in place by the beginning of school, that would be grand. Yes, I don't hear from her by the end of the week, conference. Great. My other, old business I want to bring up is, I believe we received a letter from a group called Greenway, who wants to build a bike path for the entire length of the barrier island. So anybody who's ever ridden a bike anywhere, even on the boardwalk, I guess, that's the difficulty of that. Anyway, that this group has asked the school board for a letter of support. So I would like to make a motion that we send a letter of tremendous support, not financial, tremendous support to the Greenway Group in support of their building a bike path the length of the barrier island. That's my motion.
Seconded.
I said it.
Any discussion?
I agree with Ms. Verona. We're really pushing for safe use of school, and I think this would be a benefit to that.
I agree.
Okay, take the vote. Any other discussion? Ms. Pace?
Absolutely, yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
Rhoda?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Are you going to make
How do I do it? Yeah, I just wanted to know, I just had this video in terms of the construction of Leo School, because of how it's going, and progress is good or not good, or
Progress is going very well. They've done a lot of the concrete work already with the new curbs. They're continuing with the demolition of the actual blacktop, they call it milling. They put in the new interior, process of putting in the new interior roadway. And it seems as though, based on what I last heard, that they're still on target for the scope of work that they wanted to complete this summer. And just as a reminder to everybody, that's in a sense of part one. Part two is the work they have to do on the golf course, which they're going to do in November. And then once they complete the golf course work, after the golf season's over, they'll tie both in, and then we'll be able to access the new entrance and exit with the light. But all of the interior work in terms of the new curbing at Lido Elementary and the middle school, and the new parking spots and the new interior roadways should be complete by the start of school. With at least that part will make it safer. And if you take a look at just what we're doing internally in terms of narrowing the roadway so that cars exit more slowly and proceed through the campus more slowly, that we're going to have a security arm that prevents any cars from going to the bus lane, so we won't have to worry about the safety of students entering or boarding or getting off of the school bus. So some of those things will actually lead to the start of school.
thank you.
May I just, I'm sorry, may I just add from Mr. Tito, what about the pickleball court? When will that be completed?
That should also be completed. The fall, I don't know if it's going to be at the start of school, the beginning of school, but it will be
complete soon thereafter. They've had, and I'm sure some of you are aware of some of the sourcing issues that we've had because of the
The threads, there was an issue with the threads.
yeah, so the sourcing of the carpet and in terms of some of the particular threads that they use with the artificial turf, there was a little bit of a sourcing issue that waited a couple of weeks, but they already did do the demolition of that area, and it just may not be for the first day of school, but it should be shortly thereafter.
So in September?
Yeah, we're hoping it should be September.
Okay, thank you.
And if it's anything different, I'll put in the update.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. I know I used to complain about this all the time when I was first on the board, and I know that we have new microphones, but this is crazy. We gotta do something about these microphones.
Rona, I just 30 seconds ago wrote on my agenda, microphones, capital letters.
Okay, we have to do something about it. It's embarrassing. It's hard for me to hear Dr. Cullen when he turns around just a little bit to talk to them. And I'm sitting right here, so I can't even imagine. So, thank you.
Do I need to come up there? Okay. I'm super loud, so I need a microphone. So my name is Jessica Where I live at 512 East Penn Street. I just have two questions. One of the things on the application for the use of schools is West Hempstead High School using the Long Beach High School for a swim meet. I know that previously there's been conversations about the new LIAC Long Beach team being able to have access to Long Beach High School, and I wanted to know if that has been considered, since we're giving permission for people from outside of Long Beach, but most of the LIAC team is from Long Beach.
I will tell you that we are renting the high school to outside, the pools outside high schools, but Mr. Epstein is actually here, so he may know more than I do.
So, I direct the LIAC.
Great.
Email.
Okay, so I can follow. No, I can follow my kids swim. Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much. My second question is the food bid. I'm really hoping, I know we got surveys last year about the food, and I understand that we have a new food bid. The food at the school is terrible. I have 9-year-olds who go to West School. I pack their lunch every single day. They would love to be able to buy lunch and have that as a treat. But when they come home every day and say the food is absolutely awful, it's really sad. There are not healthy options for the kids. The food is cold half of the time when it's served to them. So I'm really hoping that their new food bid, whoever is doing it, there are different options, there are different things for the kids to be able to experience. And it's not just cold pizza and, grainy tacos and, cold burgers and hot dogs, so. Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Announcements? Wisconsin Teachers Association.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I just want to take a moment to welcome and congratulate all of the new employees on tonight's agenda. I'd like to wish the best of luck to all those who meet.
Administrators, supervisory, and personnel trustee.
Good evening. I really wasn't going to speak to the it does pain me, and I did wish to work here. For me, it's questioning the integrity of the school board or the superintendent is disturbing to me, and I feel it's done tonight. Maybe not intentional, but it was certainly, in my view, is a shame. If you're worried about liability, you would run from that. You probably sued, or threatened. So, from my view, administrators and advisory group, thank you for the service and very much appreciate it. Of course, when we begin to implement whatever you're going to decide, I'm sure we're going to be talking about this. When we're talking about an optional mask, almost implementing it for adolescents, and when kids don't wear the mask, what is going to be, the expectation of the mask? And so if I want my kid to wear a mask, who's accountable if they don't? And it's certainly something to think about, just an idea of Dr. Gallagher will be speaking about it. But it is something that to consider, the whole implementation. But thank you again, Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the SCA, still, our teacher association.
Just for Wes. Thank you. I'm absolutely so disappointed to see a parent's house and everyone walk back and leave. I don't come to a lot of meetings. I've been watching so many of them on Facebook. You guys are here all the time and you're putting a lot in, both board and staff. And I think it really sucks. I know we all have different opinions, and I have different opinions. We hear each other out and then stay, and not 15 minutes later. So, thank you. Thanks for everybody. I can't wait to find out what great stuff that's gonna happen.
Right. Okay, motion to adjourn. Motion. Is there a second? Page second. Yes, favor? Thank you. Thank you.
In our case,